It had been quite a while since I watched the 1976 Freaky Friday film, and it occurred to me that I've reviewed Disney films from every single year since the dawn of Disney, apart from, well, there were 2 years, one of which I've already done now, and the final year was 1976. And I went to look at what films were released then, and the only film that really appealed to me that I hadn't seen or hadn't seen in a while, hadn't reviewed, was Freaky Friday. And I thought, seems like a perfect opportunity to rewatch it. I'm pleased to say it lived up to my memory. It was enjoyable. I still think the 2003 version, I think it's 2003, the one with Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan, that's still my favourite one. It's one that I saw several times in the cinema. I have a lot of nostalgic memories with that one. Also love the one with Shelley Long, but I think this one kind of comes in between the two. It's not my favourite, not my least favourite. So it was released, of course, 1976, directed by Gary Nelson, with a screenplay by Mary Rogers, and we have Jodie Foster and Barbara Harris playing Annabel and her mother, Mrs. Andrews. And in classic Freaky Friday fashion, that was more of a tongue twister than I was expecting. In Freaky Friday style, they, unbeknownst to them initially, switch places, and Annabelle's mind is in her mother's body and her mother's mind is in her body. And they have to go about their days trying to work out what's happened and trying to also walk a mile in the other person's shoes. And obviously that's ultimately what all of the Freaky Friday films are about. They're about mother and daughter. I don't know if there's ever been a father and son version, or even a father and daughter version. If there has, please feel free to let me know. I'd be keen to check out something that does it with a slight twist. But the classic Freaky Friday narrative is mother and daughter who don't necessarily see eye to eye about most things, have to walk a mile in each other's shoes and realise that their lives aren't a walk in the park as they believe it to be the case. And I'll say straight away, Jodie Foster stole the complete film. She was fabulous as Annabel. She was brilliant as Mrs. Andrews in Annabel's body. She made very distinct differences in the way she carried herself, in the way that she moved when she was the two characters. And, I think she gave a really strong performance. And Barbara Harris as Mrs. Andrews, she was brilliant in Mrs. Andrews, but she was even better as Annabel in Mrs. Andrews' body. It became very easy to forget that this was a grown woman, because she did so expertly portray these childlike, or I guess teenage-like qualities, that it was so easy to believe the narrative and to buy into what we were being told, which may seem like that goes without saying, but if the casting had been wrong, or if, the acting wasn't as good as it could have been, it would have been hard to believe what we were seeing. But I found it very difficult to remember that this is a film. It's very effectively done, and I really enjoyed it. What's quite interesting with this is that there was not that much interaction between Annabel and Mrs. Andrews. Whereas, say, some of the other Freaky Friday films, they meet quite a lot, they discuss what's happening to them quite a lot. That's not really the case here. They're both kind of left to their own devices for the majority of the film, which meant that there was no time for them to kind of gather their thoughts and collectively try and work out what to do. Which was quite interesting. It's not really a complaint, it's just more of an observation, whereas some of the other films were a lot more... they had to work together more as a unit, whereas here they still felt like separate individuals. But they do learn a lot along the way about each other, and it does force them to rethink certain things. I particularly liked Mr. Andrews, played by John Astin. He was obviously baffled and completely confused about why his wife and daughter were both acting very peculiarly, and I really enjoyed his performance as well. So I'm glad that I've had an excuse to sit down and watch it again. As I said, I remembered really liking it the first time. I've really enjoyed it this second time as well. It's not my favourite Freaky Friday film. My favourite is the 2003 version. Really like the one with Shelley Long. There was that one that Disney did, was it last year or the year before? Which wasn't terrible, but I kind of don't rate it as well as any of the others. But certainly the 1976 film with Jodie Foster is an absolute treat. If you've never seen any Freaky Friday films, I thoroughly recommend it. But if you have seen some others and you haven't seen this one, I'd say you definitely need to give this one a watch. I think you will really thoroughly enjoy it.